I'm in this weird state of affairs with the winter 2018 show Citrus. It was probably my third most hyped show of the season, right after Darling in the Franxx and Violet Evergarden. And on one hand, it's a visual spectacle. Beautiful characters, excellent art design, and I'm not gonna lie, the Yuri is quite the draw. But these are all things directly relating to the visual presentation. The plot is another cup of tea. It feels wrong, and frankly, despite my marvel, I can't say that I'm particularly enjoying the show. Koi wa Ameagari no Yoni, or Love After the Rain, or just After the Rain, depending on where you get your translations on the other hand, is a whole nother story. This show I immediately fell in love with, and found myself doodling about in class the next day. It has many of the same draws, beautiful characters, stunning backgrounds, phenomenal shot composition, so on and so forth. It even has a similar story. It's easy to see why these shows are often being mentioned in the same breath, and despite that, I think that recommending them together poses a real danger on a number of levels. And so, that is what we will be discussing this week. Minor spoiler warnings for the first 7 episodes of both shows. For those of you who don't know the individual plots, I'll recap them both here. Citrus focuses on a gyaru named Yuzu Aihara and her relationship with her new stepsister, Mei Aihara. Yuzu and her mother have just moved to a new town in order to live with Yuzu's new stepfather, but shortly after arriving, she learns that her new high school is an all-girls conservatory. Moreover, her new stepsister is the authoritarian student council president. The majority of the show thus far has been spent on Yuzu coming to terms with the fact that she's developed romantic feelings for Mei. Ameagari, on the other hand, is the story of a 17-year-old ex-track star named Akira Tachibana and her newfound feelings for her 45-year-old workplace manager, Masami Kondo. While slightly less broad in scale, Ameagari 2 deals with the confusing mess of emotions that such a taboo relationship can create. For seemingly obvious reasons, these two shows have been compared a lot in the last few weeks. Both are shoujo romance with a beautiful, painterly art style that focus on the taboo relationships of high school girls. Moreover, these taboo relationships are dramatically explored, rather than relying on comedy, ecchi, or gratuitous fan service, though, to be fair, Citrus in particular does have ample amounts of it. And yet, despite these similarities, I think that it would be dangerous to confuse them, because in nuanced execution, these two shows are very different. People seem to be understanding that both relationships are taboo, one being an incestuous lesbian relationship, while the other being borderline pedophilic. And don't get me wrong, this tabooed view of love is absolutely the hook that draws in the viewer. It's an unusual take on a saturated genre. Yet, despite the initial taboo, these stories are crafted well enough to help the viewer get over it, and come to enjoy watching these relationships grow. From a subjective viewpoint, Ameagari's massive age difference is the more heinous of the two. The massive gap in both mental and physical maturity is far creepier than a step-sibling romance, especially one sparked prior to the knowledge that they're even siblings. In fact, it's been called into question if this relationship would even be legal. With that being said, a 17-year-old is actually legal in the vast majority of the world, including both Japan and even most places in the US. Japan's penal code sets the age of consent at 13 years of age, but the Children's Welfare Act, Chapter 34, essentially states that though these relationships are legal, sex with anyone under the age of 18 is illegal. So, as long as no sex is involved, this relationship is technically legal within the context of the show. And in order to appease my most common demographics, the UK, Canada, and Australia all have an age of consent of 16. Germany's is 14, provided the younger party isn't being exploited, otherwise it's also 16. In other words, unless you live in Bahrain or South Korea where the age of consent is 21, this relationship would be legal in your country. But legality aside, I do think that most of us would admit it is pretty creepy. Citrus's relationship, on the other hand, feels more mild. Are lesbians still taboo? I don't know, maybe in some circles? But I'd say that in general, especially in anime, Yuri is pretty staple, though admittedly it's generally used as fan service rather than for the portrayal of a dramatic romantic relationship. The incest is the more taboo part, and honestly, just look at the last few years. Eromanga Sensei, Oreimo, All You Need Is a Sister, Yosuga no Sora, Sword Art Online, Kiss X Sis, Emotos are everywhere. And with that being said, I understand that this is completely different. With the possible exception of Yosuga no Sora, these shows have rarely tried to have an entire plot build a dramatic, romantic story centered around the relationship. They simply use it as a form of fan service or comedy. Citrus tries to use the taboo nature of this relationship to build a beautiful love despite circumstances. Maybe you've noticed, but that's the opposite of how I started this video. I've just explained that Ameagari's relationship is worse, right? Well, yes, based purely off of the taboo itself. In discussing these two shows, people have often failed to mention the context behind them, and in this situation, context is absolutely key. Citrus is maybe more vanilla than Ameagari, and yet, the relationship itself is far and away worse in a number of ways. This love is sparked by rape, or at the very least, it uses molestation as a key plot point often. In their first interaction, Mei feels up Yuzu all over her body in searching for her phone. This could have been played off as a gag, but it wasn't. Yuzu was visibly shaken by it, and rightfully so. But that could be written off as a misunderstanding given the context by someone looking for an excuse. Most of their on-screen interactions from this point forward, not so much. The next incident happens soon. In order to shut her up, Mei begins to kiss Yuzu, ignoring clear attempts to pull away and obvious signs of discomfort and even fear. Mei steals Yuzu's first kiss, dignity, and causes her to think about it constantly for days. And this isn't the only time either. In fact, this same ploy is used to dominate Yuzu repeatedly, always upsetting her and even bringing her to tears at times. Worse yet, these scenes are animated beautifully. The color palette, fluidity, proportions, everything about these visuals are beautiful. It's fan service at its greatest. The viewer is expected to get off to actual on-screen rape. This isn't a one-off rape porn either, it's a romance. This is an actual story, where you're supposed to relate to these characters, feel sympathy for them, come to love their love. Despite this, Citrus chooses to characterize the relationship through rape, before it gives you a wink and a nod and says, "It's okay, this is terrible, but we know you like it. You're supposed to get off to this." If it isn't bad enough, Yuzu falls in love with Mei, not despite her rape, but in some ways because of it. This is a show that legitimately attempts to tell the story of a high school girl being raped, falling in love with her rapist, and being continually raped. But it's okay because they're hot girls and they're in love, right? To make matters even worse, even Yuzu is sullied by this. There are points where she decides to do the same thing right back to Mei, molesting her in the headmaster's office and again in her bedroom. Because that makes the relationship healthy, right? Citrus poses a legitimate danger to society. I'm a strong advocate of the belief that the media you consume does not inherently influence your life. Rape meant to illustrate how bad a villain is? Tactless, yet fine. Rape meant to appeal to some kink? What people do in the privacy of their own home is none of my business. But this is different. This isn't just an eyepiece that can be consumed separate from philosophy. It's a charged message that rape is okay as long as the relationship grows from there. So that as long as both parties are okay with it later down the line, no one is hurt. But this is objectively untrue. Any relationship stemming from this kind of trauma is and always will be unhealthy and rife with issues and problems. In many ways, Koi wa Ameagari no Yoni portrays a fundamentally different relationship, despite its immediate similarities. First and foremost, Ameagari takes a look at a far more immature and whimsical relationship. It all starts out with Tachibana's near fantastical crush on Kondo, presented as the iconic schoolgirl crush. She thinks about him in romantic, non-sexual ways near constantly, doodles his face during class, has a cute, genuine spark of interest for him. This is entirely at odds with Yuzu's hypersexual, incredibly sudden wave of thoughts and emotions towards Mei. By contrast, Tachibana's emotions towards a 45-year-old superior seem almost normal. He was heartwarmingly kind to her in a very troubling time, and that stuck with her. As a result, she came back to his restaurant, garden, and eventually even applied there to be closer to him. Tachibana has had time to build up this crush, while never outwardly demonstrating sexual desires towards him. It's almost childish, but in some respects, that could be taken as the whole point. In fact, I think that the childish portrayal of the relationship is one of the main goals of this show. Just take a look at the childish imagery during the opening, with Tachibana and Kondo riding on these fluffy alpacas. Or later in the opening, with the line, "Don't treat me like a child," a frequently uttered sentiment by teenagers struggling through the concepts of maturity. Or here again, where Tachibana spends thousands of yen on gashapon keychains in the hopes of winning one that an elementary school student said brings relationship luck. This childish whimsy is even present in the character that is repeatedly called old, Kondo himself. He feels joy over learning magic tricks, on helping lonely people, and gets excited over watching a fast runner. This is what Tachibana is drawn to: childlike awe, not a stuffy old male. Additionally, whereas Citrus repeatedly progresses its plot through aggressive sexual assault, Ameagari moves at his own pace, ensuring that everyone is comfortable. Kondo isn't coming onto this girl. In fact, as of episode 7, the crush is entirely one-sided. This isn't a matter of pedophilia, it's a schoolgirl with a crush. Even if it does wind up as a relationship, it'll have been something that Tachibana has been practically begging for. And so I'd argue that not only is it not illegal within context, it isn't even that creepy. But that's that. 2 taboo shows about 2 taboo relationships. And yet, 2 relationships that are nothing alike. Hey guys, thanks for watching this week's video on Koi wa Ameagari no Yoni and Citrus. I thought I'd be able to get it out a little bit earlier, but hey, whatever, it's out now. If you liked, I please ask you to like, comment, and subscribe, and if you really want to help me make more content like this in the future, you can head on over to patreon.com/Senpizzle, or just to keep up to date with me, follow me on twitter.com with the handle @Senpizzle. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.